So welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Susan Garrett. Some of you may know me from Springfield. I was a former legislator. So in the last year, I have retired and am now the chairman or the chairwoman of the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform. I will ask the panelists to start. We're starting with the Honorable Scott Drury to briefly talk about their accomplishments or their bio. We'll let them do that on their own. And then after that's done, each of the panelists, one by one, will be presenting their portion of the program. Just look at your agenda, and that's exactly how it's going to work. And then afterwards, we hope to have some Q&A. I'm sorry that we did the best we could, by the way, to fill the room but not overfill it, but we, a couple of people off on that one. So thank you for your patience. So Scott?
Do you want me to do my bio and my comments, or just?
Just your bio first, and you're just talking to Candy.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, ICPR, for hosting this event. My name is Scott Drury. I'm a first-term state representative representing the north suburbs of Chicago, Highland Park, Deerfield, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, Glencoe, and Northbrook. Before running for office, I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago across the street for about 7.5 years, from 2003 to 2011, working under Pat Fitzgerald, doing mostly white-collar crime and public corruption cases. Before that, I was in private practice at Sacknoff and Weaver, which is now Reed Smith, where I'm currently working. I'm also an adjunct professor at Northwestern, where I graduated from, at the law school, where I teach a trial advocacy class. And got into running for office from a lot of the work that I saw when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and came to the conclusion that while we need prosecutors to prosecute the bad people, we're not going to prosecute our way to good government. We need to have good people in government and good people willing to run for government. And that's been my goal, and that's why I wholly support ICPR and all good government organizations to try to make people trust government again in Illinois.
And I forgot to tell you, do you guys mind standing up when you speak?
Sure.
So CanTV can,
Sure. So my name is Ricardo Meza, and I'm the Executive Inspector General for the state of Illinois. I've held the position for about 4.5 years.
Hi, my name's Eileen Mitchell, and I serve as Vice President of External Affairs for AT&T Illinois. Prior to working at AT&T Illinois, I spent nearly 11.5 years working for House Speaker Michael Madigan down in Springfield, and I look forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Milner. I used to be the longest-serving police chief for the city of Elmhurst, and I was like a legislative chairman for the Illinois Association of Chiefs of Police, which got me interested in politics. I got elected in 2002 to the House, and in 2005 I was appointed to the Senate, and I stayed there until last year, retired last year, and I waited a full 10 minutes before I became a lobbyist. So there was some time there. Thank you.
My name is Honey Jacob Skinner. I'm a partner at Sidley & Austin. I graduated from Harvard College and Northwestern Law School a couple of years after Scott, many actually. I focus on healthcare issues, in particular in Medicaid reimbursement for hospitals and other providers, and very much appreciate, Susan, the opportunity to be here today.
Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoy your sandwiches. My name is Peter Freeman. I'm the practice group leader of the Holland and Knight Chicago Local Government and Real Estate Group. We represent many, many municipalities and other government bodies in the state. Personally, I'm the village attorney in Lake Bluff and in Oak Brook and general counsel for the city of Des Plaines. Formerly legislative director for former Congressman John Porter from the 10th District of Illinois, and also a judicial clerk for Judge Conlon on the Northern District of Illinois. And thank you also to ICPR for the event today.
My name is David Weisbaum. I'm the director of the Index Department of the Illinois Secretary of State. That is the department that regulates lobbyist registration expenditure reporting. Prior to that, I spent 12 years as the deputy director of the department, and in way back in history, I spent about 10 years as Secretary of State's office in motor vehicles and administrative hearings as either administrative positions or as a budget officer. In the interim, I was on staff with Speaker Madigan from 1983 to 1988, at which time I went to Department of Mental Health, did some analysis of federal rules and regulations and statutes, and then moved on to lobby for the Illinois Healthcare Association, which specialized in services at nursing homes, rehab facilities, and community-based facilities for the development of the disabled and the mentally ill. Thank you.
Okay, so now if we could start right down the row with Honorable Scott Drury presenting his portion of the program. And if you could stand up.
So I was asked to talk about the lobbying experience from a representative in the General Assembly's perspective. And when asked to do that, I started thinking, you know, how do I look at it? And I don't think you can start that conversation without looking at how lobbying is perceived in the public. And I don't know when it began, but my sense is lobbying in modern times, the word lobbying, the word lobbyist, it has become a bad word. There's been a lot of bad publicity about, you know, bad lobbyists doing bad things, just as, you know, bad doctors can do bad things. But what is it about the perception of lobbyists that has made it a bad term? I'm against lobbyists. You hear it in campaigns all the time. And I think what it is that the public perception is that the relationship between legislators and lobbyists is too close, and so that the general public doesn't really have a say in what goes on. It's all about lobbyists taking people out to dinner, the money going back and forth, and that is how governments, whether it's state government, federal government, local government, that's how it works. In truth, lobbying is not all bad. In its purest form, lobbying is a necessary aspect of government, and that's what I came to learn. I came in with the same perception as I was just describing. But lobbyists are experts in their field, and there are a lot of bills that come across my desk on a daily basis that I don't know about. And I will sometimes ask a lobbyist, or a lobbyist will come to me and ask and tell me what the facts are and answer my questions. And you can immediately tell the good ones from the bad ones, because the good one will tell you the downsides too of their bill, or they will tell you who you should talk to about the bill if you want to get a different perspective, because they know that at the end of the day, the game is building trust. And in that pure form, I don't think there's any problem with the relationship between lobbyists and state legislators or the governor's office or the president. Like I said, it's a necessary form of government. Unfortunately, the system isn't always as pure as we want it to be, and it's not because of corruption or bad intent. There's good lobbyists and there's bad lobbyists. There's lobbyists like anyone in any profession where the moral compass is at a certain level and others is at a different level. And it's up to legislators to decide who they want to interact with and who they want to go to for information. Certainly, there's things that can be done in state government to weed the bad ones out and make the public feel better about the whole lobbying experience. You know, with all due respect to everybody on the panel, Illinois is only one of 15 states that allows people to go directly from being elected to being a lobbyist. It's called the revolving door. And that leads to the perception of, you know, people are in the General Assembly not for the good of government, but to get a job on the way out. Some states have a 2-year freeze on lobbying. Some states have 1 year. Illinois has absolutely nothing. I have a bill that we're trying to get out of Rules Committee and get advanced that would change that, because I think that there should be a cooling off period so that when you're in the General Assembly, you're legislating on behalf of the people of Illinois, and when you move out, you do something else. Even if you have no bad intent in making the move, there is a bad public perception. There's a lot of other lobbying bills that are out there that I've proposed, that I know that the Inspector General has proposed. And the problem is it's hard to get those bills moved, one, because legislators don't always want to go against lobbyists, because then it may not help them politically on the next bill, and also because sometimes it hurts their own perspective. If I vote against the revolving door, then it's going to affect me directly. I won't be able to become a lobbyist as soon as I'm done. And it's hard to pass legislation like that, and I think it's up to people who come to forums like this to start talking about these issues, and if we're upset or we think lobbying is a bad term, to go out there and make changes to it. So that's my perspective, but I'd love to hear what your perspective is and answer questions as the forum moves on.
So my name is Ricardo Mays again, and when I was called by Susan, my first reaction is I'm not a lobbyist, I'm a representative, head of a state agency, but the Lobbying Act actually touches on the fact that state agencies may be required to appear before subcommittees or House committees. So specifically, there's an exception to the Lobbying Requirement Act which allows agencies of state government to appear before committees of the House or the Senate for the purpose of explaining how pending legislation will affect their agencies. So we're exempt from the Act with regard to that. But there's another provision in the Lobbying Act I think that's important that I wanted to mention, and that relates to compensation of lobbyists. So as a state agency, the Lobbying Act prohibits us from hiring outside lobbyists to advocate for us, and it makes sense. You're a state agency. If you have an issue, you should be able to speak to the legislators regarding that issue. But sometimes the opposite happens, and that's exactly what happened to me in October of 2010. I had just been appointed the Executive Inspector General, and I started having meet and greets with legislators, one of which was Susan Garrett. I believe I met with her on a Friday. That following Monday, she called me and asked me if I'd be interested in having our agency be appointed the Inspector General for the regional transit boards, which include METRA, RTA, PACE, and CTA. She gave me a whole 10 seconds to think about it. I said, well, I guess that'd be fine. I just got appointed. What am I going to say? She's like, well, can you be down in Springfield tomorrow? Because I'd like you to testify before one of these committees. So that's how some of this stuff gets done. It gets done quickly because even though then Senator Garrett had been working on legislation relating to an Inspector General, there had been issues regarding who should be the Inspector General. Should there be a committee? How many people should vote? Agencies were given the opportunity to voice their concerns. Apparently there was no agreement, so she went ahead and pushed forward for our agency to be head to serve as the Inspector General. So within that veto session, which was, I think, 6 days or so, that bill got passed. It got introduced and it got passed. We then became the Inspector General the following July 1st of the following fiscal year. The other thing, as far as our agency, is that sometimes we have issues that sometimes we will issue a report of investigation that relates to an agency itself that we investigated, and then as a result of our investigation, members of the House or Senate may wish to have a hearing relating to our findings. So occasionally we're asked to testify with regard to our reports, what we did, what our findings are. We did that a couple years ago as it related to the DCFS investigation that our office conducted. And then other times, we get calls from representatives asking us if we think there's anything they could introduce to support the work that we do. And this year, for the third straight year, State Representative Fred Crespo has introduced a bill on behalf of our agency and that would amend the Ethics Act that would require and obligate additional investigative reports that our agency issues to be publicly released. That bill is in Rules Committee and has been in Rules Committee for the last 3 years. But despite that, I think it's important for us to continue pushing that bill, and we're going to continue doing it because I think it's important for agencies like us that conduct investigations to have our reports released so that the public knows how we're spending our time and our resources. And then finally, there's also another bill that was introduced this year that would allow our agency to disclose information about an ongoing investigation during the course of the investigation if we believe that there's a risk to public safety. Now, the reason we need that bill is because our investigations are confidential, and therefore, while we're conducting an investigation, we are prohibited under state law to release information to the agency head. This bill would allow us, during the course of the investigation, to release some of that information, even though we're not completed the investigation. We're hoping to get that bill through because I really can't imagine somebody opposing that, but I suspect there'll be some discussion and And we hope though that bill will pass.
Again, my name is Eileen Mitchell, and I'm with AT&T Illinois. In my role at AT&T, I really wear 3 hats. I oversee our government affairs work in Springfield, which is all of our work with our government affairs team internal, our contract lobbyists, and our political action committee. And then in addition, I work with our external affairs manager, who are really the company's eyes and ears in the communities we represent, where our customers live and work. And these are folks who are in the individual communities, also working with local governments. And then also I oversee our charitable giving and as a liaison to our foundation down in Dallas. When it comes to Springfield, you know, AT&T is clearly a big business in Illinois. We're an employer, we're a retailer, we're a property owner, we're an internet service provider. So every year there are any number of issues that we get involved in Springfield. And our goal is always to ensure that state policies that pass in Springfield, or even at the local level, are done so in order to incent private investment so that we can continue as an industry to do what we do, and that the policy is keeping pace with the choices consumers are making in the market, and then the needs that we have as an industry. And I really view our role when we lobby as that of partner. We try to work with members of the General Assembly and policymakers to pass legislation that does incent private sector investment and that will help retain and create new jobs in Illinois. And so keeping legislators informed of what's going on in our industry in the model that Representative Drury spoke about is really how we try to approach our work in Springfield. You know, more specifically, as we work on our issues, we try to anticipate what the legislators might be thinking about the issue, how their constituents would react to it, and whether they're going to vote yes or no, what that means for them, for their constituents, and for Illinois as a whole. And we try to factor all of that in. And so when you go to meet with a member, you want to sit down and be able to present your side of the issue. But I think an honest discussion of any issue requires you to also present what the opposition would say, or who else they might expect to hear from when going in before a member on any particular issue. You know, with the amazing pace of change in the wireless industry, it's really a great time to be a representative of AT&T in government affairs and in the community. And we have our Rethink Possible advertising tagline, but truly that becomes almost a daily affirmation for me as I rethink how it is we approach legislators, how the way we communicate has changed so dramatically over the years. Each of us, I mean, once upon a time we were writing letters, making phone calls, or making appointments to see people. Today, the way you can communicate with your legislator is really endless. And so as a lobbyist in Springfield, we have to factor in what does digital communication mean? And are we active in social media? Are we communicating through emails now? And there, Twitter, Facebook, there's a wide variety of ways to engage a legislator at this point. And if you think about it, consumers and businesses are communicating in ways today that we really never thought possible, even a few short years ago. Every month, about 450,000 people are moving to these new technologies, tablets, smartphones, voice over internet communications, new home phone options. And recognizing the choices that consumers are making, AT&T is trying to work with policymakers to set up a limited number of community trials to make sure that these next generation communication systems are reliable, that they ensure public safety, and that they provide enhanced services for our customers. And having a healthy dialogue with policymakers about that is something we look forward to. And we join with policymakers and our customers to ensure that these multi-year trials will be a success and really will lead to smarter, better, and more opportunity within the communications, in terms of communications options. And we really do look forward to continuing that dialogue in a very open and matter-of-fact way. And I'd just like to highlight a couple of other things. When we do engage with legislators in order to move the ball forward on public policy, we have great examples of success, and then we try to celebrate that success. And I have just a couple I'd share with you. In 2010 and again in 2013, the state embarked on a massive looking at the communications laws in our states, and we have successfully made incremental progress towards modernizing those laws, and I think that's very important. And so what we do in the end, as a result of the 2013 changes that were made this spring. The General Assembly passed and Governor Quinn signed into law another update of the telecommunications law earlier, or in June of 2013. And just last month, we were able to join with Governor Quinn at our Michigan Avenue flagship store to announce that AT&T was bringing 200 new jobs, nearly 200 new jobs to Illinois as a result of that smart and good public policy change, recognizing some barriers for our investment and removing those. And so those are the kinds of examples we like to celebrate. In addition to that, as we make our capital investment announcements, and AT&T is investing enormous amounts of capital in the state of Illinois. And last summer, we joined with policymakers to announce $625 million of investment in our wired and wireless networks in Illinois in the first half of 2013. And in fact, from 2010 through 2012, AT&T's invested more than $3 billion in our networks right here in Illinois. And those are the kinds of stories we like to join and partner with members of the General Assembly, with municipal leaders, to announce in their communities, to celebrate the success of when Illinois makes good policy decisions, good things can come as a result of that. And that's how we spend our time, and that's how we try to communicate to the best of our ability down in Springfield. I'll look forward to any of our questions as we go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Eileen. Well, so as a perspective, from a lobbyist perspective, as well as wearing the hat as a legislator, I have to tell you a few things. Number one, a legislator will see between 3,000 and 6,000 bills every session. Think about that. And we are expected to be the experts. People expect it. People who have a bill that's so important to them will come to us, and they think we're going to be the most knowledgeable people. Well, what we need is a lobbyist or group of lobbyists that we can go talk to and that we trust. We have to have that. Now, if a lobbyist comes to me as a legislator and lies to me, that person probably won't be a lobbyist very long, because if they lied to me, they lied to others, no one's going to hire someone like that, because I won't talk to them again. Number one. Number two, the legislation, you're right, it's about perception. I mean, it's a perceptual thing, but there are very, very few legislators who became lobbyists. Some might have tried it, dabbled in it, but they just go away because their personality typically is not conducive to being a lobbyist. They're not used to sitting there waiting and going through this process and the detail work and everything that goes along with lobbying, as opposed to when they were a legislator. In fact, as a legislator, you almost tend to get ADHD because there's so many things coming at you all the time, and pretty soon you're like, whoa, So as a lobbyist, for industry groups, what we try to do is protect those industries that need to be protected, and the ones that don't, we're going to be out there and speaking against it. So every day there's legislation that's introduced. So you could have a business, and a business is a productive business. You may have hundreds of employees, and people are doing a good job, and you're doing a good job, and yet there could be some competitor or somebody else out there trying to undermine you and put you out of business. And you know what? You might not even know about it. Think about that. And so the lobbyist is there to protect you, to protect your interests, and also to be able to have dialogue with somebody who may be on the other side of the issue. And as a legislator, that's the most important part, because now, as Scott said, you can hear the information from one side, you get the information from the other side, you have to make the best decision you can make. And so I believe that, everybody needs a lobbyist, basically. And it's interesting, because some groups that you would think wouldn't need a lobbyist, for example, and I don't mean to point the finger here, but, the BGA, great organizations out there working, doing their best. They know everybody. They can get on television. What do they need a lobbyist for? But yet, guess what? They have a lobbyist. Because they need someone who understands the system, who can be there every day and talk to the legislators and try to move something to help them do their job more efficiently, to get a better piece of public policy out there. And that's what it's about. In my opinion.
Thank you, John. So here we are at John Marshall Law School. So I'm assuming many people in this room are either lawyers or law students. CLE, is it show of hands? Lawyers or law students? Okay, so I'm a lawyer at Sidley, and I want to address on this part of my agenda, Susan puts out appropriately, how do you represent industry as a lobbyist? I would put out that the General Assembly is just another forum for a lawyer or a non-lawyer to be an advocate. So some of my partners end up in courtrooms. Some of my partners are transaction guys who are in conference rooms all day. my forum that I'm before, about half of my time, is the General Assembly. And I'm really going to focus on that because, as Dave will point out later, from the Index Division's point of view and in implementation and enforcement of the Lobbyist Registration Act, you do not need to be a lawyer to be a lobbyist. But I'm going to talk about, as an advocate and a lawyer, what I do as a lobbyist. So as an external lobbyist, that is, that I'm not within a hospital. I represent, as I indicated, a lot of hospitals. And so I'm an external lobbyist lawyer at a firm. What I do is to develop strategies for my clients, for these hospitals, in order to be proactive in expressing to the elected and appointed members of our government their interests and objectives, their agendas, as well as to ensure that initiatives that are counter to those interests, that we have done an effective and a persuasive job as we go to meet with Representative Drury and his colleagues to make a case that our interests should be furthered. And the way we do that is we try to be more informed than anyone else. We try to bring documentation and data, evidence-based arguments to our advocacy. We are not, for my clients, and I've been doing this since 1981, for my clients, we have found that over time, the most effective lobbyists and advocates and lawyers, or non-lawyers, are those who have current, reliable information, and as Representative Drury pointed out, who have credibility, so that Representative Drury would know that when I go in and lobby with him on Medicaid, that I have been conscious of the opposites, the arguments in opposition to my position, that I have raised them to him, and that I have responded and explained to him why any argument in opposition to my concerns should not prevail. He needs to be able to trust me and my judgment. He needs to be able to be confident the questions that he's raised will be promptly responded to. As Eileen has pointed out, and I was just talking to Peter, who's coming next, the pace of this business is incredible. You need to move very quickly. Our colleagues, we were just mentioning when Susan appointed overnight you to take over the Inspector General position on RTA, there is no time to the business. So you're emailing, you're on top of it, you're getting someone a document, you're preparing an amendment that day, and you have to be very comfortable with that kind of pace and exchange. The pace of, before the General Assembly, I'm not talking about the executive branch of government and the other state constitutional officers, but before the General Assembly, the calendar focused pretty much between January and June 1. That's basically the regular session time, and then with veto session in the fall, in which the General Assembly reconvenes to take action based on what the governor has done to the legislation that they passed in the spring session. So if you're an advocate, a lobbyist for your client's interest, you better block those months, January through June 1, and be either on the ground or your ability to get to Springfield really at any time. And as I'm looking out over this room, oh my gosh, you know, seeing Andy and Peg and Michael and others who have all been longtime Springfield people, you know, I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't know. At the very top, what I like to do as an advocate is understanding that the gun goes off in January on bills that I'm going to support and those that I am going to oppose for clients. I like to spend the summer and fall getting my clients to focus on the issues that they want to pursue during the spring session, to technically develop language for bills and amendments, resolutions that they can support, to do a lot of intel on who will be the other proponents and opponents to those initiatives, to understand what the best arguments are to further our bills and the weaknesses that we will have so that when we hit the ground in January, when the deadline for filing approaches, we can go to legislative sponsors, walk in their office and say, will you be the chief sponsor? Will you be a co-sponsor? This is why you should be on this. This bill is before your particular committee. Your constituent in your district is concerned about it. Whatever the argument needs to be made, you need to be able to hit it and go strong with that in January. And looking up at the camera that's taping this proceeding, you need to be very comfortable, as Eileen referenced, in the broader arena. It's not just in Springfield in a back room. Your issue could go before the media. You need to be able to have talking points and be ready for press comments. And then you have to wake up in the morning and realize that a whole new issue came up for which you were completely unaware, and you have to have that same kind of preparation in defense of your client's interests for those. So I find it a really exhausting. Maybe it's I just got back this morning from Springfield, but you really have to be up and all in on all fronts. If your client is a steward of state funding, that is a level of responsibility that is even higher. So hospitals in the state, as you know, receive Medicaid funding. So from my point of view, if you're a hospital or some other entity that is the beneficiary of governmental dollars, you have to be prepared to effectively make a case that you are deserving of those dollars, that the value added and benefit to the state of Illinois is real. For example, how? So one of the hospitals I have the privilege of representing, Lurie Children's Hospital, takes care of children in every legislative district of the state. So we go into legislators who are located in south of Springfield and say, you may not know this, but we're your hospital too. And these are the numbers of constituents from your district that we had the privilege of caring for last year. So you're looking to not wait for a legislator to come to you. I would also say, maybe this does go without saying, but I should say it, so very important, these relationships. Senator Garrett, who's convened this group, very important that over time your clients as lawyers or non-lawyers build up trust and credibility with the individuals who are in leadership in the House and the Senate. Because they are those, over time, if you have been effective and credible, you have been hardworking, and you have been trustworthy, these legislators will count on you, just as John Milner just pointed out, Senator Milner just pointed out. They will trust you to be their partner in this legislative process. Sorry if I took up too much time. Thank you.
Thank you. Before the program says why municipalities lobby, so before I talk about why, I just want to mention a couple things about how and a couple of intangibles. So first, there are a few municipalities, in case anybody didn't check, in the state of Illinois. We have more than any other state in the country by far. And the first question that comes up for my clients that I serve as general counsel from the residents, as well sometimes from the elected official, is why do we need to lobby? The General Assembly created us. Those are our fellow brothers and sister public elected officials. Why do I need a lobbyist when I should just be able to call my representative, and my representative should be my lobbyist? And there are times when there's a project or an issue where that is all you need, where it's distinct, it's discrete, and it may not be a big project, and it's something that makes sense, and you don't need a lobbyist. But for all the reasons that a number of the panelists have already said, it is totally a legitimate and effective solution to have somebody who is focused, spends the time, and is an expert on one issue, if there is one issue, whereas the member of the General Assembly is focusing on 1,000 issues. And we can't, and it's unrealistic to expect that all of the issues that may be relevant to all of the different interest groups are going to be at the top of that legislator's mind all the time, whereas somebody who's working in partnership with the municipality will be able to do that. But there is that initial hurdle to get over, at least for municipalities who is a sister public agency. Along those same lines is always a hurdle of spending money, public funds, for a lobbyist. So now we're spending public funds for a lobbyist to lobby publicly salaried members of the General Assembly. I know it's obvious, and it doesn't bother me at all, but it is a distinct element of why municipalities who have a need for a lobbyist, there is an optics issue that they need to go through on their boards and with their residents as to the need and the mechanics of using a lobbyist and the need for it. The other thing is, when a local government hires a lobbyist, they don't do it like AT&T does it or like some of the hospitals do it. We have to do it before the TV cameras and in an open meeting. Very infrequently can we do anything like that at a closed meeting. And we have to pay all of those bills, a vote of the Board of Trustees on all of those bills. So again, just another added element to why municipalities and local governments, when they need to hire lobbyists, there are these factors that they need to manage and be prepared to answer the questions that their residents will give them. When I first started, I always assumed that when a local government went down and had an issue before a member of the General Assembly, that there would be some aura of legitimacy, some aura of, oh, a local government in my district, they, you know, they get some credit, credence. And I think that's true to a large extent, but over time, I think it is not so much, you know, municipal, and I'll go into some of the issues that municipalities lobby on. Those interests are like private sector interests to a large extent. They're financial, they're economic, they're operational, they're legal. So substantively, they're very similar to whether it's private or public sector. But the one distinction that I do think matters for municipalities is, and politics, and not in a bad way politics, is that these are local governments being run by other fellow elected officials. And those elected officials inevitably have, either through party affiliation or through political activities or through government agencies, have natural connections with other government officials, elected government officials. And I think it does create some level of, camaraderie is the wrong word, but some connection or existing relationship when there's an issue before the General Assembly that municipalities are interested in. It's a little different, I think, than for private sector than for public sector. As to how municipalities lobby in a bunch of different ways, from a statewide perspective, we have the Illinois Municipal League that lobbies on behalf of all municipalities on regional or statewide issues that affect all municipalities. So if there's an amendment to the Freedom of Information Act or the Open Meetings Act or ethics reform that affects all municipalities, it would be unlikely that a particular municipality would hire a lobbyist when that is being addressed, hopefully, by the IML. Or there are regional entities called COGS, Councils of Government, Northwest Municipal Conference, Lake County Municipal League, that are more regional groups of municipalities, and they also lobby. There are times when there's regional issues. Gaming expansion is sometimes a regional issue. TIF reform is sometimes regional. And sometimes gun legislation was regional over the past couple of years. So those things can be handled a lot of times by those regional bodies, and those regional bodies have their own lobbyists. IML usually does not have its own lobbyists. They are on staff at IML. With regard to individual municipalities, there's a lot of reasons why particular municipalities, larger municipalities, City of Chicago, Peoria, Des Plaines, big municipalities, usually have more issues that are directly connected to the General Assembly and the ability and resources to have a lobbyist either for a particular matter or on retainer every month dealing with a whole bunch of issues. But some substantive issues that municipalities have to deal with. Home rule authority, to the extent that the General Assembly may take action to limit home rule authority, individual home rule municipalities may want to get involved. Property tax issues for different municipalities, different exemptions may apply. Grant money may not be a General Assembly issue, but will definitely be an administrative issue. And IDOT is Illinois Department of Transportation is someplace that municipalities often have lots of issues with and often use lobbyists for. As I said, TIF, tax increment financing and economic development issues. There's been a lot of situations where one municipality has a particularly difficult, big development project, and they may need assistance in amending the TIF Act, in allowing that municipality a special right to condemn property quickly called quick take. That has been done specific to a municipality and often requires a lobbyist. And then the other thing I would add is administratively or procedurally, municipalities, as I said, are creatures of the General Assembly, and the way they handle zoning and the way they handle subdivisions is all, particularly non-home rule, comes down from the Illinois Municipal Code, and there are oftentimes tweaks to that based on court decisions that assist municipalities in hopefully efficiently handling those things. So I will stop there, and thanks again, Susan, for putting this together, and I'll hand it off.
Well, as you've heard from all these other panelists, what really happens in Springfield is relationships. And what the Secretary of State's office does is we gather information about the registrants in the industry, who are the individual live body players, how much money they spend on expenditures on the officials. That dovetails with whatever information they get from the Board of Elections, and it makes it easier for them when they're working to see just who has relationships with whom, and is it strong, is it weak, and what do I need to do about it? And to the end that we have to gather information, this whole process began in 1957 when the first Lobbyist Registration Act was formed. 1957 was a year when we had people in the Illinois House of Representatives like Paul Simon, his future wife, Jean Hurley, Abner Mikva was in the House then, and a guy named by the name of Tony Scariano. These are all lions of progressivism and some of my early heroes. But when you think about establishing an act to help accountability, who was a person who drafted and passed the first lobbyist registration bill? It wasn't any of those guys. It was a guy by the name of Senator or Representative Paul Powell. So there's a little irony there, and that I kind of enjoyed when I discovered it. In that bill, it was very brief. They said that if you are going to be, and they didn't even call them lobbyists, they called them government agents. If you were going to be a government agent at that time, you had to file with us. You had to file who you worked for, your employer's address, your name and address, and the subject matter of that you would be lobbying, and you paid a $5 fee, and if you violated anything, you could have a fine of up to $200. I think it's really significant that in the simplicity of those points of the bill that they also included a phrase in there that indicated that no lobbyist could be paid on a contingency basis. I would have thought that would have developed later. It was in the first bill, and it is still there today, somewhat expanded upon. It wasn't until 1969 that this first law was amended. It was amended in the Senate. I always thought that it might have developed, I mean, there's a lot of social upheaval and cries for accountability in the late 60s, but I thought that it might be partly that. I also thought it might be partly due to the death of Paul Powell and the discovery of the shoeboxes in his hotel room that might have caused the expansion of this bill. But just recently, I read that Paul Powell died in 1970. Well, so this wasn't, you know, addressing him per se. It turns out that W. Russell Arrington, who was the Republican president of the state Senate at the time, introduced two lobbyist registration bills virtually identical. One was the bill that I'm talking about right now that affects lobbyists and their employees. The other was to apply the same principles that were to apply to the delegates to the 1970 Constitutional Convention. I had never heard that before. I was real happy to pick up on that tidbit. In that bill, they created the first exemptions from registration. They required a registrant to identify the party for whom he was lobbying and state a description of the legislation that they anticipated lobbying. Penalties were significantly increased, and a lobbyist convicted of any of the violations could face a ban for 3 years. And if they violated that ban from lobbying, it would have cost them up to $10,000 and 1 to 10 years in prison. So that was a major feature. It also authorized states' attorneys and the Attorney General to initiate cases for violations of the Lobbyist Registration Act. In 1993, this has an interesting cast of characters. Tom McCracken introduced some legislation. He's a DuPage County state rep, excellent legislator. Introduced some legislation that was purportedly pushed by Secretary of State George Ryan significantly, and there were some good features that occurred in this bill. It expanded the parties to whom you could lobby, or it required you to declare what parties, all the parties that you were going to lobby. Previously, you declared that you were lobbying a member of the General Assembly. This bill created the obligation to report that you were lobbying executive and administrative issues as well, and that stands today. They created the categories that exist today. If you made an expenditure, you had to categorize it as meals, beverages, entertainment, or food and lodging, or a gift, or honoraria. And it also stated that an expenditure report had to be filed even if no expenditures were made during that reporting period. In 2004, one of the very significant things in lobbyist evolution was that the General Assembly mandated that the Secretary of State create an electronic system whereby registrants would register over the internet with our system, and that we would display the results of those registrations and their expenditure reports on the web for anybody who cared to view it. It's also given us an opportunity, since it's a real deal electronic database, we can extrapolate a lot of information on a custom basis to come up with various types of conclusions, and it's very good for us in spotting trends. In 2009, a very major bill was introduced by Speaker Madigan. And by the way, this was a real response to the Blagojevich administration. It contained not just requirements, new requirements for the Lobbyist Registration Act, but also about the Ethics Act, and enhanced the powers and duties of agency inspectors general all over state government. One of the exceptions that was taken strongly by lobbyists was that the fee was increased in this to $1,000 per registrant. And that was a huge, huge increase. Standard lobbyist registrants would pay a $350 registration fee per year, and 501c3 groups would pay $150 a year. Well, the ACLU filed a lawsuit. The courts decided that the fees paid for lobbyist registration and maintenance and enforcement of the act had to be paid for by registration fees, but those fees could not exceed the cost of our administration. So we threw out some numbers and did some long division, and we came up with the fact that it would cost $311 to register a lobbyist, and those funds, based on certain numbers of expectations of certain number of lobbyists, would cover the costs of our operations. We settled on that. Barbara Flynn Curry did a follow-up piece of legislation that established that fee, which still stands today. The rest of that bill had some really major changes, some of them that just make lobbyists just grit their teeth. Before, the expenditures that you had to report were split into two categories: those which you could, under a certain level, that you could report in the aggregate, and those that over a certain level that you had to report with some great detail. They're called itemized expenditures. In the Madigan bill, every lobbyist had to report every expenditure, no matter what the amount was. I remember the first time I had a meeting after that law passed, I had a meeting at Randy Witter's office, and he offered me a bottle of water, and I accepted. The next thing I know, I got a letter stating that he had reported an expenditure on me, the value of which was 16 cents. You know, so I enjoyed that. Yes, he enjoyed that, and he's kind of the lobbyist. He's been the point man on trying to create relationships with the leaders of the General Assembly and us to come up with some what they believe are more reasonable ways of conveying the information that's vital to this process. Oh, this is the lovely one. Heretofore, expenditure reports were made twice a year. You reported your activity and your expenditures and your registration information on a semi-annual basis. The new law required you to do that on a semi-monthly basis. So what has occurred here is it was a real nightmare the first year that it was implemented, which was 2011. But the one thing that it did do is that when we were on semi-annual reporting systems, we would experience anywhere from a 16% to a 22% non-compliance rate in filing. Some people just didn't file, or they filed, but they didn't file timely. Once we went to a twice-monthly system, we started seeing compliance rise significantly, and now we're probably compliance over 2013 was, I have it on here somewhere, 94.6%. So we're really happy about that. We don't particularly want to have the money that lobbyists have to pay for late fees. You know, the registration fees pay for what we have to do, but we want their information. And this effort of the twice monthly filing has really helped that a lot. The bill in 2009 or 10 required that lobbyists take an ethics training. And so within 30 days after every registration, every year, the lobbyists have to go in. They have to review information that our Inspector General has drafted, and so that they're aware of the relationships between lobbyists, public officials, and public employees in the areas of the Lobbyist Registration Act, the Procurement Code, and the State Ethics Act. And finally, maybe not finally, the bill also provided that when a lobbyist or a lobbying entity was found guilty of a crime, that depending on the severity of that crime, the trier of fact, whether it's the state's attorney or the attorney general, that they could impose a fine of, now the range is up to $10,000, but they could impose that fine on a per day basis. So if a violation was especially egregious, you could be facing one heck of a fine, and you still have the three-year ban on lobbying. I'd like to say that if I haven't said it already, that bill was not just geared to lobbyist registration. There was an awful lot of attention to the Ethics Act, revisions to that, and very, very significant attention to the powers and duties of inspector generals throughout state government. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Susan. Appreciate your time, and if there's any questions, it's great.
Well, yeah, we're going to do Paul Powell. Oh my gosh, that's a first. I didn't know that. Because we're a little bit over, if we could do the Q&A. If any of you have questions, direct them to anyone on our panel, and we'll do the best we can. We'd like to see the program through until about 1:30. If you have to leave earlier, don't worry about it. So go ahead.
I'd just like to know if you have some special tips about the most successful way to lobby Speaker Madigan.
We can't tell you.
And here's the microphone if anybody would like to respond.
I would. I was counsel to Speaker Madigan and parliamentarian for the Illinois House, and I think that Speaker Madigan is acutely interested in the merits in terms of your hard work, in terms of the pros and cons of your position. So he is, you know, kind of the first guy in the office and the last guy to go home in terms of his work. And a couple of us have had the opportunity to work for him up here. So when I know that there's an issue that I'm working on, I write him a memorandum which sets forth my concern about a particular issue and sets forth the pros and cons. I can say virtually without exception, I will hear back from his staff. They will want to know it's on the merits, kind of, you know, what my position is. So that is not to say that we don't live in a political environment, but I will say that in terms of your question, how to engage with him, you know, I do it in terms of very specific memorandum and follow up with his staff.
Any other questions? Yes.
Stephanie Victor. I'm on the board of ICPR, and I'm also on the board of the Illinois Rental Property Owners Association. And my question is specifically about municipalities and also this, where mid-sized cities will join. Two-part question: where is the role of the individual or small organizations to lobby against these larger groups like municipalities who have their own way of doing things, and when there's room for change on, for instance, rental property owners, where can our voice be served?
You know, as I mentioned, municipalities start with, there's a board of directors, an elected board of directors on those municipalities. So they don't make a decision to lobby on a particular issue unless substantively they think it's right, but also unless presumably they've analyzed whether their residents and the people that elected them agree. So I know that on a lot of real estate issues, whether it's for sale signs or whether it's transfer tax issues, that the realtors and local groups have been very, very vocal at those local board meetings to try to, you know, to express their views on it, and it's effective. Right.
There are a number of lobbying groups that would actually represent you. You can find them as they're out there. And if I could just mention one thing, we kind of missed it. I just want to make sure everybody got it. But this whole issue of why would a municipality need a lobbyist? And I hear that all the time. In fact, from some of my peers when I was a legislator, they would say, you know, I'm their lobbyist. They don't need a lobbyist. Really? So I represented like 17 communities. And one community, there were two communities that were along the Route 90, and they each wanted their own interchange. But I'm their representative. I'm the senator for both communities. So how do I lobby for each of them? There's only going to be one. At another community that absolutely did not want a bridge crossing the Fox River, and the other one absolutely wanted a bridge crossing the Fox River. I represent both. What do they have to do? There was a school district. In a school district, one of the towns I had wanted to get out of the school district, was U46 in Elgin, but I represent Elgin and South Elgin. But I represent Bartlett. I represent Hanover Park. I go all the way to, you know, Palatine to Schaumburg. And the town, Bartlett, looked at me, and the elected official said, you are our representative. You have to help us with this. But then the other town says, you are our representative, and we can't let this happen. So what do they need to do? Obviously, they're going to have to hire their own lobbyist. Yes.
I'm the director of the Institute for Justice Clinic on Entrepreneurship, and we represent low-income entrepreneurs. So I'm curious, especially from folks who have experience as legislators, what's the best way to get the concerns of individuals in front of you when their spokespeople are not legislators, they're not representing businesses, so they're not down in Springfield on a regular basis, and you need to gain your trust and build credibility quickly and perhaps humanize the issues that are in front of you by bringing individuals in front of you who are faced with challenges?
I think it's a terrific question and kind of springboard from Stephanie's question. I think people need to talk to their individual legislators. One of the most surprising things to me is, you know, people have been calling me the Honorable Scott Drury. Is like, I'm just a guy who ran for office, and I'm people's neighbors, I'm my kids' parents, you know, and they yell at me just like every other parent. And so talk to us and let us know your issues, because we don't represent lobbying organizations. I want to make that clear. Individual legislators do not represent big lobbying organizations. We represent people. And if people come to us with issues, then we can take those issues on. And we're not going to take every issue on. An individual legislator may disagree with your issue. But if they're good at what they're doing and they're honest about what they're doing, they'll tell you why. And they'll give you suggestions. And may not be exactly what you want, but they may be able to guide you through why that's not going to happen, but why this can happen. And I don't think that happens enough. I think people figure out if I call, it's going to go into a general email, you know, general voicemail or general email account, and they'll never respond. I know for my office, it doesn't run that way. We respond to people. We did legislation this year based on a phone call. Someone said, I didn't realize Illinois let kids' data go to some general database, and then everyone has your kids' information. It was a phone call from a person I don't know. She then emailed me a couple articles, and we just passed a bill out of committee to prevent districts and school boards from releasing that data. And there were a lot of big organizations who were opposed to it because there's money to be made off your kids' data. But that came from an individual's idea, and if that person never approached me, I would never know about it, and we wouldn't have proposed the legislation. So I'd say sometimes you just got to be active and find out who your representative is or what representative you think would like the issue, and contact them.
I guess flipping back my old staff hat, I would say that my observation is the more individuals who think enough about an issue to contact their state legislator, the better off the whole process will be. And that legislators, my observation was, always responded to the people they heard from their community. And so few people choose to engage individually like that, that I would just encourage you to do that. You know, I spoke a lot about what we do at AT&T when we lobby, but I think it's also important to think about how it gets done. And our team engages members, you know, to establish an open dialogue, to communicate clearly and honestly, and to keep the commitments we make. And I think that translates not only to us as a lobby entity, but to the way individuals can also lobby on behalf of the issue that matters to them. Those are principles that I appreciated as a staff member, and I think that those are the right principles for everyone who's engaging in this public process to keep in the forefront of their minds. And with that, I think it's I think it's the way things can get done and progress can be made for Illinois, whether you're an individual or a big entity or a municipality. And I think it's the right way to do business in Springfield, and I hope we all agree to that.
And in terms of how you get it done, for most of us in the legislative hat again, is that constituents are number one. So if anybody comes to the door, there's a lobbyist, there's a constituent, typically we will take the constituent first. Then, how do you, if you can't get to Springfield or get to the, your elected official's office, email can work, but let me tell you folks, some days, especially if you get to be a busy legislator, I get 500 plus emails a day. And I really don't know where they come from. You know, I've turned out I was getting emails from Ireland and China, and you don't know, but depending on the issue. So a handwritten letter is better than an email because we get very few of those. Phone call is great. Seeing your legislator face to face, it's a wonderful thing. Some of the best legislation that I passed came from individuals in the community or groups in the community that came to me with their issue. And because we worked as a team, we were able to pass some of the best legislation that's out there, and I see that all the time, working together as a team.
There's one way in the back. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
This legislator partly answered my question, but I'm going to ask it again for everybody. You all have mentioned that you are very busy and you're running to and fro all the time. So let's say you have a relationship with a lobbyist and you know them personally, you see them, and then a constituent you've never heard from before contacts you. Is it really true that you're going to be the president to that constituent and meet with them first? And
Yeah.
That's no sense of the question, but also how about the fact that that constituent may not be themselves able to contribute anything to your...
Oh, absolutely. Constituents still number one. And as a lobbyist, I know that. So, for example, I'm visiting one of the legislators, and the secretary comes in and says, you know, one of your constituents is here. Right then, I'll just get up and say, I'll talk to you a little later. Because constituents number one. And you don't have to donate, and you don't have to be part of the same party, and you don't have to have any of those things. This could be the first time you've met your legislator. Most legislators, I'm not going to say all, but most legislators would just jump right out and talk to you. Now, I have to tell you, I have to share a couple stories, but just one I'd like to share is I actually tried contacting a legislator's office one time where literally there was a voice message that says we don't take phone calls. So if that happens to be where you live, I don't know what to tell you, but overall that doesn't happen.
You know, and from an entity perspective, I would just add to that, we tried to lobby, and I think Honey mentioned this in reference to some of our hospital clients. We lead with, do you know how many employees we have that live in your district? And those are the kinds of informed facts that we want to share with legislators. What kind of investment are we putting into your district? Who are we employing in your district? And I think with some of the volunteer work I do with some not-for-profits, that's the same way we suggest that they organize as well. So often, Misericordia is going down to Springfield for their lobby day, and they're reaching out to legislators with families who are from their districts. They're not reaching out as employees of Misericordia, but they have identified the families to go out and lobby on behalf of them who are constituents of the legislators. And I think that's another way to think about how you can organize.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is Leighton Olson. I've been an attorney. My name is Leighton Olson. I'm an attorney who has been involved in telecommunications and economic development since the Ameritech SBC merger, now AT&T, in 98, 99. I want to ask how modern digital economy or advanced communication tools can help organize the massive information that you get, including the stuff that may come into the Secretary of State and other kinds of places, in terms of business intelligence kinds of tools. I know that, say, in the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning has a whole series of community events, and they do keypad polling on just all kinds of stuff to try to get consensus or dissensus, and things that might affect the overall big data that might show up at the Digital Government Summit, you know, et cetera, in September. So I just want to throw out a number of those things because when it comes to social media, when it comes to the accounting for the communication with state legislators, that might be a new part of the definition of grassroots lobbying, and the council can have to figure out whether you're trying to affect the legislature. You know, would that be the same as TV or radio advertising in past years? And so I'd just like to ask a series of how do you organize and get business intelligence tools to kind of figure out every day what's coming in the door?
Well, in my little pond, which is hospital, healthcare, and media, Medicaid, I will respond. So 2 years ago, the Illinois General Assembly passed a bill called the SMART Act, and it was intended to save money in Medicaid. There was no great public policy behind it other than there was a financial bogey that had to be hit because of the state's dire financial situation, and certain drastic cuts were going to be made. Among them was to stop funding of a waiver program for medically fragile children to stay at home. And the cut for that funding would have forced these children into institutions out of their home. These are kids who are intubated and on machines, into hospitals and nursing homes, and actually be more expensive. It was for all of us who are involved in public health for children, it was an absurd policy, tough vote for General Assembly members. And after that bill ended, a group of these families, about 50, created a page on Facebook and using other social media avenues, and without sleeping, basically, with full resolution, they went after this to restore funding and told stories of children who have hard lives and the families who support them, and put this all on media and took the General Assembly to task and the governor to task. And in my own view, as someone who wants to work with the General Assembly and not have the door slammed in my face, I was stunned by how aggressive and how clear they were about their adversary to this action, but did not blame them a bit, because these are their families and children. And as Representative Drury and Senator Milner was in the General Assembly at that time, the General Assembly decided with great velocity to put funding back in within months. It was stunning, and these families have not stood down. They said, we won, but we still are going to sleep with one eye open. And I had never really seen that effective and quick a turnaround. So that would be the example that I would use.
Any more questions from the audience? Any more comments from the panelists? Thank you. This has been a great program. Really appreciate it. Thank you.